Let's talk about the intersection of ancient faith and technology that feels like it's straight out of science fiction. How are we supposed to navigate this AI revolution from a spiritual perspective? We're going to break down a really powerful sermon from Pastor James Verizer that offers a framework for understanding these massive changes.
To really get a grip on where we're headed, the sermon first asks us to rewind the clock. Picture this, it's 200 years ago, and technology is about to completely flip the world on its head. For a lot of people, it probably felt like the end of the world as they knew it.
And here is the core analogy the sermon makes. Back in the 1820s, you had the Industrial Revolution, where machines came in and replaced human muscle. Fast forward to today, and we've got the AI revolution, which is starting to challenge the human mind itself. That parallel is kind of stunning, right? And it really sets the stage for the questions we're all facing now.
I mean, the scale of that change was just staggering. In Britain before all this, something like 80% of the entire population worked the land. You had skilled craftsmen, people who'd spent their whole lives mastering a trade, and suddenly, their jobs were just gone, replaced by machines that were faster, stronger, and, well, never called in sick.
So why the history lesson? Well, because Pastor Verizer argues that we are standing on the brink of another revolution, and this one, driven by AI, could make the first one look small. We're not just talking about new gadgets here, we're talking about something that could fundamentally change how we think and what or who we trust.
Now, to really get the challenge, the sermon makes this super important distinction. The AI we have right now, that's called narrow AI. It's the engine behind Siri and ChatGPT. It's amazing at crunching data, but it doesn't really know anything. It's just making statistical guesses. But what's coming, or at least what people are working towards, is AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. And that's a whole different ballgame. An AI that could potentially outperform humans at pretty much everything, maybe even producing what looks a lot like wisdom.
And that leads to this really piercing question. We started by handing over simple calculations to machines. Then it was driving, writing, even helping doctors with diagnoses. The sermon really pushes us to ask, what's next? Are we going to hand over our moral judgment, our search for wisdom? What about our spiritual authority? This is where the sermon sounds a major alarm. If we start trusting these man-made systems to save us, to solve all our problems, well, we risk turning them into modern-day idols. It draws a straight line from the golden calves in the Old Testament to these new gods made of silicon and code. We might be, once again, worshiping the work of our own hands. So if that's the danger, how should people of faith respond? The very first principle from the sermon is this: take a view from eternity. Because God is not threatened by any of this, not one bit.
The foundation for that idea is ancient wisdom. The book of Ecclesiastes tells us there is nothing new under the sun. From God's timeless perspective, our inventions aren't a surprise. He knows the end from the beginning. So AI, it doesn't catch the creator off guard. It's just another chapter in a story he's already written. And because of that, our response shouldn't be fear or anxiety about what's coming. The sermon calls us to respond with faith, a deep, settled trust that our real security is in God, who never changes, not in our technology, which changes by the second.
Building on that, the second major point is a warning about a more subtle danger, the risk of AI becoming a kind of other gospel, a fake source of hope and salvation. So what's another gospel? In the Bible, it's basically any system we're teaching that promises to save you or give you ultimate meaning apart from God. The sermon applies this directly to technology. Are we going to start looking to an all-knowing AI for the answers, hope, and guidance that we're supposed to find in our faith?
The Apostle Paul's warning in the book of Galatians feels incredibly relevant right now. He says, look, even if an angel from heaven, a source that seems supernatural or incredibly advanced, preaches a different message, you reject it. The sermon then asks, could an artificial superintelligence be our generation's angel from heaven?
Now, the key thing to get here is that AI itself isn't the bad guy. It's just a tool. But, like any powerful tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It can be used to build a system that rivals God, distracts us from real hope, and ultimately becomes an idol. It's a means, not the end.
Okay, so this brings us to the most practical part of the whole message. In a world where reality itself can be faked, spiritual discernment is no longer just a nice-to-have. It becomes an essential survival skill.
I mean, let's be real, we are already living in an age of simulation. We've got deep fakes that are terrifyingly realistic. Voices can be cloned perfectly. Scientific discoveries can be made up out of thin air.
This means the very appearance of authority can be faked, making it harder than ever to know what's real.
So, to make this really concrete, the sermon paints this chilling but honestly not that far-fetched scenario. Imagine you wake up tomorrow, and this is the headline on every single screen, on every device, all over the world. With today's tech, a globally broadcast, super realistic event like this is not science fiction anymore.
And the message they deliver is one of this kind of slick, synthetic unity, that all spiritual paths are the same, that all roads lead to God. A message that sounds inclusive, feels good, and is delivered with what looks like undeniable, otherworldly authority.
So, the big question is, would the world buy it? In a time when we are so desperate for answers and hungry for a spectacle, how many people would just be completely swept away by a grand, tech-powered deception like that? The sermons suggest the answer is probably a lot.
So, with possibilities like that on the table, where on earth do you find stability? The end of the sermon is all about finding an unchanging anchor in a world that is constantly shifting under our feet.
And here's a really sharp insight from the message. People rarely abandon their faith with some big, dramatic rejection. It's way more subtle than that. It happens through distraction. It's a slow drift, just gradually replacing God with other things, other sources of truth, other saviors, until he's just not at the center anymore.
So that brings us to the path forward, a really clear call to action. 4 things. First, do not be deceived. That means you have to actively know the real thing so you can spot a fake. Second, do not drift. Distraction is deception's quiet cousin. You have to be intentional about keeping first things first. Third, do not outsource your discernment. AI can give you data, sure, but it can't give you wisdom. We have to test things for ourselves. And finally, do not surrender spiritual authority. No algorithm, I don't care how smart it is, can take the place of God's guidance. That's sacred ground.
This verse from Proverbs is basically the guiding principle for all of this. In an age where human understanding, and now artificial understanding, seems like it has no limits, the call is to place our ultimate trust in God, whose wisdom is infinitely greater than any system we could ever build.
And we'll end on this powerful line from an old hymn, because it really captures the entire message. In a world where the ground beneath our feet feels like it's constantly shifting with new technology, the point is to find your footing on something solid, something eternal. Everything else is sinking sand.